Hello and welcome to Volume 103 of Capital Ideas Live. In today's issue, we'll talk about a variety of issues related to hunting, and we'll talk about a new tree identification application for your phone, and we'll talk about estate planning after the fiscal cliff. And as always, we'll get a perspective on the timber markets. I'm Hayes Brown, the General Counsel of the Alabama Forest Owners Association, and I'll be your host for today's discussion. By now, you know that the fiscal cliff has been avoided, but where to go from here? So we've asked a tax attorney, Johnny Lyle, to give his perspective. Hello, Johnny.
Hello, Hayes.
Many of us have been waiting for about 10 years for the estate tax to resolve itself in order to do meaningful estate planning. Is it safe to go ahead and do that now?
It is safe to go ahead and come out of the cold and do some estate planning. A lot of people have deferred for 10 years in anticipation of the possibility that the estate tax may be repealed in its entirety. We now have settled law, nothing on the horizon to sunset, that we're going to have an applicable exclusion that's going to be indexed at $5 million per person. And we're not going to have the same scenario like we had in 2011 where it was destined to sunset. The can was kicked down the road again, and now we have some certainty. Of course, Congress could come in at any time and change the law again in the future, but there aren't any pre-wired changes in place.
Okay. Now, some people were concerned enough to make substantial gifts at the end of last year, 2012. Was that a mistake or a waste of time?
It was not a mistake or a waste of time. A lot of people were under the misunderstanding that by making that $5 million gift in the face of a potential $1 million applicable exclusion, that they were going to reduce their estate tax. That technically was not correct, because the way the tax was to be calculated, you would have pulled back in prior gifts made during lifetime so that you would not have actually reduced your estate tax. But the reason it was not a waste of time is no matter what, future appreciation was out of the estate. There was some thought that either the estate tax would come back in at $5 million, $3.5 million, or that they would fix that little hitch that would have added back lifetime gifts. The reason that little hitch was in there is we'd never anticipated the possibility that the applicable exclusion could actually go down. It had always been intended to go up, back from the old days of 180,000 up to 600,000 and crawling up to $1 million and now up to $5 million. It had not ever been contemplated to go down. So the tax form calculation didn't work for someone who was reducing the applicable exclusion.
Okay. Well, if you have an estate that's less than $5 million, does that person need to do any estate planning at all?
Well, they still need to do estate planning. There are, of course, non-tax reasons to do estate planning in order to pass title to assets. But right now, with portability in place, which means that for married taxpayers, that the surviving spouse can use $5 million of the deceased spouse applicable exclusion if it's not used upon the deceased spouse death. A lot of people have taken that to mean that if you have less than $10 million, you don't have to do any tax planning or estate planning, and that's just not necessarily true. As long as Congress is spending like drunken sailors and the government's printing money, we run the substantial risk that over time inflation will drive values up, and even beyond the point that the applicable exclusion is in place, and growth could cause someone's estates to exceed the limits to where they would be taxed. So that, for example, if a couple has $5 million of total assets, upon the death of the first to die, with portability, there'd be no tax due. But if you allow the surviving spouse to inherit everything, and then their assets grow from $5 million to beyond $5 million, then there will be a tax upon the death of the second to die if those assets grow beyond $10 million. However, if upon the death of the first to die, you have the traditional bypass trust planning where the spouse of the first to die, their assets are placed in a bypass trust. Those assets grow and are not going to be included in the estate of the second to die, and mathematically you wind up being able to shelter more assets over time.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Johnny. And we recall the words of Ronald Reagan, who said, at least drunken sailors spend their own money. So we appreciate it, Johnny. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
If you'd like to make your views known to Congress, you can use a new tool called Popbox, and we have a co-founder of that organization that developed that tool, Rachna Chowdhury. Hello, Rachna. How are you?
Hi, good. Thanks for having me.
Tell us about Popbox, P-O-P-V-O-X.
P-O-P-V-O-X, which in Latin is shorthand for the people's voice.
Okay.
And basically what Popbox allows people to do is connect with their members of Congress. But it's just not about venting, it's about strategic action. And the way I think about it is it's like your car's dashboard. It helps you see what's ahead, how fast you're going, what's coming up, and it helps you see what's around you. So for Congress, it helps you, Popbox helps you see what bills are coming up before Congress, what they're going to be voting on, and then also it allows you to see the pulse of the country and what your neighbors and your community are saying to their members of Congress as well. And the way it works is every single bill pending before Congress is available on the site. And if you go to popbox.com, you'll be able to get started and see a list of bills by issue area. So say there's an issue that you care about, like firearms or the national debt or the estate tax. You can find a bill, and then you can write a letter to your member of Congress. And then Popbox delivers it, and we guarantee message delivery. And then we aggregate all those letters in one place on the site so people can see in real time what support and opposition looks like. And that's really important for holding your members of Congress accountable.
Well, I can see how an individual could use it and how these letters could be collected, but how could an organization use Popbox?
Well, we have a lot of free tools and paid tools that allow organizations to harness that individual power of action, but in a group. So in other words, they can tell their networks to go weigh in on a specific bill and then see that aggregate support and watch a pie chart change from, very few people supporting something to a whole bunch of people supporting an issue because they believe in it. And it's a really good third-party metric to see how strong your organization's grassroots activism can be and how an organization with strategic tools can influence what's happening in Congress.
How do you know your particular tool is actually working?
Well, I'm based in Washington, D.C., so I talk to members of Congress and their staff, and they always say that Popbox is one of their go-to sources for information about what the public is saying about particular bills. And also in the previous Congresses, we've seen bills that have been withdrawn or have not moved forward because of strong public support. But it only works when that public sentiment is transparent, because we all need to know what our neighbors and our communities are saying to their members of Congress and not have the way things work now where Congress is listening to people behind closed doors.
Okay. Thank you, Racha. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
John Seiler is a professor of forestry at Virginia Tech, and he, along with others, have created a tree identification application for your phone. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Hayes. I think we've got something here that a lot of Alabama forest owners will find really useful.
Good. I think it's called V-Tree, and can you tell us how the project got started?
Yeah, this started from an email I got from Mr. Bob Potts, a forest landowner in Tennessee, whose career is in computer programming, and he utilized our web-based tree identification material for years and years and years. And he contacted me with just a cold email saying, how would you like to build an application for Android phones? And I said, boy, we've been talking about it for years but don't have the resources or the knowledge to do it. And that's basically how it got started. I didn't know if Bob was capable of doing it. We get a lot of emails like that. And long story short, after 2 years, Mr. Potts is the real deal and we've got this thing out there for people to get. And the good news, it's free.
All right. Well, how does it? What's unique about this particular tree ID application?
Yeah, great question, because there's a lot of them on there, and you fish around and you wonder what you're getting. I think there's four things that are pretty unique. One, it's free, and that's really rare if you go out and look at the tree identification app. We just want to get this in as many people's hands as possible. The second thing, which is really unique, is that it contains all the trees and shrubs in North America, which sounds like a lot. But for folks in Alabama, if you just type in your location or you let your phone find your location, it becomes the trees of Alabama. If you're traveling out west to the Grand Canyon on a vacation, even before you go, you can type in Grand Canyon, and it will shorten the list to the possible trees you could find in the Grand Canyon. So it becomes a bookshelf of books, trees of every state, trees of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, if you want it to be.
Because that's one of the times that you're interested in looking at. You're in an area that you don't normally live, and you want to find out what those trees are, so it automatically does it for you.
Exactly. Third thing it does is, and now you get there, it narrows. So you're looking at something. It takes you through an interview where you can answer as many questions as you want. If you can't answer anything other than this is a vine, you just say vine. And suddenly it becomes the vines of Alabama or the shrubs of Alabama. But the more questions you can answer, the list gets shorter and shorter and shorter. Then you can jump out and look at it and try to find the plants you happen to be staring at. And then
I could see how a tree professional would use this, but how would just a homeowner who's not even a forest landowner, how would they use it?
Yeah, we're finding a lot of comments from folks that are using it to identify proper firewood, folks that are always just interested in what they've got in their yard, and because it can interview you, they're able to just walk outside and finally find out that, oh, this is a sugar maple in my backyard, or that's red maple, and that's not good firewood, and sugar maple is better firewood.
Okay. All right.
And if they can't get that, they can ask. There's an Ask an Expert function on the phone, and they can send me an email.
Excellent. Okay. Well, John, we appreciate that. Thank you very much. Well, the chances are pretty good that you know a hunter, or perhaps are one yourself. Hunters and landowners go hand in hand. But what's the economic impact of the hunting industrial complex? Here to tell us about it is Kip Adams, who is with the Quality Deer Management Association. Hello, Kip.
Hi. Hey, how are you today?
How many hunters are there in the entire United States, and how many of these are deer hunters?
There's about 21 million hunters in the United States, and that's a little larger number than we often see, because when you see that number, you hear state agencies talk about that. They're often referring to the number of hunting licenses they sold, but a current survey looking at actual hunters show there are a small percentage of hunters that consider themselves a hunter that doesn't necessarily hunt every year, and or don't purchase a license because they're either exempt because of landowner status or age or something else. So we sell somewhere between 13 and 15 million hunting licenses a year, but the actual number of hunters is a little higher. It's closer to 21 million. And being a deer biologist, this part's important to me because obviously I work with deer and people who hunt deer, but if you take a look at of all the different species we hunt, about 78% of our hunters hunt whitetails. So if you take about 78% of that 21 million, it comes out to just over 16 million whitetail deer hunters in the United States, which is quite a large number.
Okay. Now, these 21 million hunters, what do they contribute annually to the U.S. economy?
This is a big figure, and this is one of the reasons that hunting is so important to our wildlife management system for both species we hunt as well as all wildlife species we have, including most that we don't hunt. And in any given year, hunters have an impact of about $67 billion is what they contribute to our economy.
My goodness, that's a large number. At least it used to be. Now it's a quaint number, but now we're talking about trillions. But $67 billion is still a very, very large number. Let's take it down to the average hunter. How much does he or she spend every year on hunting-related items?
But just a $67 billion sounds pretty large. The average hunter spender is also very large. It's just under $2,500 a hunter. And some are sitting there probably thinking, I don't spend anywhere near that, while others are probably thinking, boy, I spend way more. Part of this is if you take a look at the top items that hunters are spending on, it involves more than just firearms and ammunition, but includes other things like land ownership for hunting, land leasing specifically to hunt, transportation to get to that place. So altogether, in 2011, the average hunter spent just under $2,500 on all things hunting related.
Okay, we'll go over those numbers again. 21 million hunters in the U.S. who spend $67 billion annually, and each of them spends on average $2,500 per year. All right. Thank you, Kip. We appreciate that.
Thank you, Hayes.
Well, what do Gibson Golden, Autumn Rush, and Royal Limbertwig have in common? Well, they're all antique or heritage apples that are now available for purchase. Wayne Bassett with the Wildlife Group has been working hard on developing them. Welcome, Wayne.
Hey, thank you very much, Hayes. And we're proud to be a part of that $67 billion in the hunting industry at the Wildlife Group.
That's right. Well, first I wanted to ask you about a book you told me that you read. It's by Lee Calhoun, and it's called Old Southern Apples. Tell us a little bit about that book first.
Yeah, Hayes, I tell you, Mr. Calhoun was kind of sent out on a little project to find an old apple for a friend after he retired from the Army, and it just really exploded for him in finding a lot of these apple trees that were scattered around our country starting in the early 1700s. And the impact to the families and the farms during those years intrigued him, and he put together a compilation of all of the apples that he could come up with. All of the seedling apples, there's well over 1,800 documented apples, and he tried to find as many of them still in existence, and thus came up with the book of all the ones that he's been able to find.
Tell us about these antique apples and kind of what they're used for. I can imagine you could eat them, but are there other uses as well?
Oh, yes, sir. For us at the Wildlife Group, we began searching for apples that were very hardy, disease-resistant, and dropped at different times for the wildlife. And as we pursued that interest, we found that there were a lot of people that wanted an old apple that was at their grandmother's house or their great-grandmother's house that they used to pick apples off of. And so in doing the research, we got with Mr. Calhoun and another place called, to have some apple sign wood, the Horn Creek Living Historical Farm has put together as many as possible that they've been able to find. And so, but the apples can be used, for cider. I'll have to tell you, I've never made any apple cider, but I'm looking forward to it. Apple pies, of course, stewed apples for breakfast in sausage drippings, they tell me is just delightful. A lot of times they make apple butter, and I believe that we're seeing people more interested today in growing some of their own fruits and vegetables.
All right. Now, if you have one of these things, where are you supposed to plant it? Can you just stick it anywhere?
Well, you can, with the root stocks that we have available to us today, we can grow them on a M9 dwarf rootstock, Hayes, and we can have some in a 25 or 30-gallon container out on our patios. It's not necessary to have a 40 by 40 spot in your yard, which if you do, you could go with a larger tree on a semi-dwarf rootstock. Mm-hmm. So anywhere from a 5 by 5 spot on your patio to a larger spot in your yard, we can grow them now.
Okay, and they do need full sun, right?
Yes, sir. They do perform better. The more sun, the better. But if you get 5, 6 hours, 7 hours of sunlight during the day, they'll do great.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Wayne. We appreciate it. Alabama Power maintains about 10,000 miles of transmission lines, and often these are used by hunters to get a chance to see wildlife. John Chitwood has some thoughts about the safe use of these areas. Hello, John.
Good morning, Hayes. I appreciate you letting Alabama Power be a part of the program this morning.
What is your actual job with Alabama Power and your responsibilities?
Well, as you mentioned, we own and operate about 10,000 miles of electric transmission line in the lower two-thirds of the state of Alabama. Primarily for this audience, we'll be talking about deer stands and proper deer stand placement, but just a little background, we're regulated by the National Electric Safety Code, and, we also want to ensure that any uses of that right-of-way is in a safe manner to the public. We want to operate our system in a reliable, safe manner and ensure that any encroachments do not pose any infringements upon our ability to operate and maintain our system in an appropriate way.
Okay. Can you give us some examples of hunting and tree stand placement within the right-of-way and ways that we can try not to interfere with what you're trying to do?
Yeah, absolutely. We want to promote hunting on the right-of-way as long as folks do it in a safe way. The don'ts of our system are, please don't ever attach a tree stand, whether it be a ladder stand, a lean-to stand, lock-on, platform, climbing stand, directly to a structure. That's just not the safe thing to do. Secondly, please do not locate a stand directly under our high-voltage conductors or the transmission lines. At a minimum, we need to be at least 10 feet outside of those conductors. And then thirdly, we really don't want any tree stands within a certain radius of our facilities, and facilities meaning structures, poles, towers, the guy wires, the anchors, the access roads that we have to go to and from our facilities.
Okay. If you want to know more about this topic, where can we find some things that you'd like to make available?
Well, Hayes, we've provided a couple of good articles. We've been able to work with some good folks here in the state of Alabama with the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources for a couple of good resources. In your Alabama Hunting Regulations magazine this year, you can find an article. Also online, there's a copy of an article that was published in the Outdoor Alabama magazine to give you more information. And then there's also a broader pamphlet that we've created that'll give the property owner and the homeowner a little bit more information about what they can and can't do on their property that is located within the transmission line right away.
Okay. Well, thank you, John.
Thank you.
Investments such as mutual funds are managed by a fund manager who usually resides in New York, but forest investments are managed by the person who lives in your house. So listen to what Beth Richardson has to say when she talks about optimizing your timber investment. Welcome, Beth.
Thank you, Hayes.
Beth, you're a big fan of thinning, I think, and I wanted to know, why you like doing these thinning demonstrations so much.
Well, I think it's very important to show landowners, what the stand should look like after a thinning. I found that landowners were not willing. They love their trees, and when the loggers come and start you're taking out too many. And so we need to start showing them what it looks like after you take them out, and then show them different stands progressing, so they can see how the trees are growing as you keep thinning. They keep growing. Our demonstrations were clear cut at age 24. All of them were yielding over 25% return. And so I did an investment analysis, like if I added $1,000 to the price in 2 years, my internal rate of return went down. So the longer I held it, even if I was getting more money, the lower my internal rate of return. And the annual equivalent value at age 24 was $70 per acre per year on the poorest soil.
Okay, so all that points to thinning as an important part of your investment management scheme, and not to put that off, right?
That's correct. One of the things that landowners really need to do, we talk about good thinning jobs, and it's encompassing. But I separate it into a good thinning job, meaning the correct trees and the correct thinning method has been used, and a good logging job, meaning that none of your trees are skinned up, everything's nice and neat, and it's being merchandised to its highest value. And the landowners often keep in mind that third row thinning and not taking out anything else does not optimize diameter growth, and that's where you get your volume. And landowners need to start going to the fifth row thinning or even further out. And the further apart your takeout rows, the higher you can optimize the stand. And it gets harder for the loggers, so you got to negotiate. They don't like to do things like that, but some of my demonstrations are 6-row thinned, and it can be done. We just work really hard together.
Okay. You've got a list of things to do to optimize your investment listed on the website, so I encourage people to take a look at that, and we thank you for that, Beth. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you for having me.
In our markets chair is returning guest Pete Stewart with Forest to Market. Welcome back, Pete.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you see any new demands that are going to be placed on Alabama's forest this year and next?
Yes, we think it's going to be a good year for the Alabama forest owner and actually for the Alabama forest products industry. We're experiencing, as many know, a recovery in the housing industry, and that means recovery in the lumber industry. And so the demand for saw logs is up will be up over 2010 by about 1.2 million tons in the state of Alabama. In 2010, the demand was about 7.3 million tons. We expect it to be about 8.6 million tons, which is great if you need to sell saw timber, and many landowners have put off their final harvest for some time. The second piece is, for 2013, demand for pine pulpwood will likely be 1 to 1.5 million more tons than it was in 2012. That's because Louisiana Pacific's OSB mill is opening in Thomasville, Alabama, and Westerville has a pellet plant that will be up and running by the third quarter of this year.
All right. Well, with this revival of the lumber industry, are you expecting to see increased saw timber prices?
Well, that's the downside. We really don't see any increase in prices for this year, and the reason is, Hayes, is that there is so much supply of saw timber in Alabama, principally from landowners putting off sales over the last 4, 5, or 6 years, and so it's a kind of like no good deed goes unpunished, right? So if Alabama landowners have done such a good job of growing trees, they've honestly grown too much, so there's a little too much supply for demand. In 2011, we saw saw timber prices in the mid $27 per ton range. We actually saw that decrease in 2012, and we expect that to be flat again in 2013.
All right. What about the European demand for biomass and pellets as a result of signing the Kyoto Treaty?
Well, it has come to Alabama, there's no doubt. The Westervelt company is starting and building a pellet plant specifically to export to Europe. And if you recall, the pellet plant in Selma, Alabama, that went bankrupt a few years ago. It has been repurchased by a company called Zilka Biomass, which plans to reopen that in the latter part of 2013. So it's not going to. This new demand is not necessarily going to be a windfall for landowners, but it does increase demand for pulpwood, which increases prices. In 2011, we saw pulpwood prices in the high to mid $8 per ton for stumpage across Alabama. That really increased by about $1 or 8% in 2012, and we expect another pretty substantial increase in 2013.
Okay. Well, thank you, Pete, for that forecast and that looking ahead. We appreciate that very much, and that's all the time we have for this issue. Our thanks go to Johnny Lyle, Rachna Chowdhury, John Seiler, and Kip Adams, and we also appreciate the contributions of Wayne Bassett, John Chitwood, Beth Richardson, and Pete Stewart. Firearms and the Second Amendment have both been in the news a lot lately. President Obama is expected today to outline things that he'll do by executive order to limit the use of certain types of guns. But hunters who use firearms exhibit the best in gun ownership. They practice a time-honored sport and are generally safe and responsible people. They can also be the best friends an absentee landowner can have. And so, thanks to the hunters, the economy is just a little bit healthier, and wildlife populations are better managed, and American traditions get passed along throughout generations. On behalf of the Alabama Forest Owners Association, I'm Hayes Brown. Thank you for joining us for this issue of Capital Ideas Live.